श्रीशैलेशदयापात्रम् धीभक्त्यादिगुणार्णवम् यतीन्द्रप्रवणम् वन्दे रम्यजामातरम् मुनिम् लक्ष्मीनाथसमारम्भाम् नाथयामुनमध्यमाम् अस्मदाचार्यपर्यन्ताम् वन्दे गुरुपरम्पराम् यो नित्यम् अच्युतपदाम्बुजयुग्मरुक्मव्यामोहतस्तदितराणि तृणाय मेने अस्मद्गुरोर्भगवतोऽस्य दयैकसिन्धोः रामानुजस्य चरणौ शरणम् प्रपद्ये लोकाचार्याय गुरवे कृष्णपादस्य सूनवे संसारभोगिसन्दष्टजीवजीवातवे नमः।
Asmad-gurubhyo namaha, Asmad-paramagurubhyo namaha, Asmad-sarvagurubhyo namaha. So again, we're going to continue on with our discussion of Sri Vacana Bhusanam with a commentary by Manavala Mahamunigal. Sri Vacana Bhusanam is by Pillai Lokacharya. So last time we were talking about, there are a couple of sections we were talking about mental turpitude and also about criticism. And we discussed about how constructive criticism is all right, but normally we should try to avoid criticism as Vaishnavas. And so now we pick it up, I believe, with Sutra 363. Let me just find the text here. Yes, so the previous section we just finished was about being critical, criticizing, and with an emphasis on our criticism always being constructive, if we need to criticize at all. But in general, we should try not to criticize. So Sutra 363 starts a section on forbearance and tolerance. Sutra 363. One should not reveal to the Lord and other devotees offenses committed against oneself by others. Just as Goddess Sita did not inform the Lord or Hanuman about the offenses of the demonesses. Using the example of Mother Sita, we should avoid complaining about any ill treatment that we may receive from others. Even having suffered terribly by the hands of her captors, whose function it was to torment her day and night, Sita did not reveal her suffering to either Lord Rama or Hanuman, or request them to redress the wrongs. In fact, it was Hanuman who saw the atrocities of the demonesses and offered to avenge their wickedness, but was restrained by Sita. So here in this sutra, Lokacharya is giving us an example of Mother Sita when she was in the Ashokavana, or the forest of Ashok trees, in Sri Lanka after being kidnapped by Ravana. And she was being protected by demonesses. So she had these female demons guarding her, and they were tormenting her day and night. And of course, even Ravana was tormenting her, saying different things, that your husband is dead and all these sort of things. But Sita bore that. She bore that. She had what we have here: forbearance and tolerance. She tolerated these things. So this is one of the marks of a Vaishnava, is that they tolerate. And they tolerate to such an extent that they don't even complain. They don't even complain about being abused by others. So they take abuse on themselves. There are many, many examples in Vaishnava history of people who took abuse on themselves. This example, of course, is from the Ramayana. But we also have other examples of Vaishnavas. What comes to mind is the story of Krimikanta Chola. There was a Chola king in Tanjavur who was a Shaivite, and he actually didn't like Vaishnavism at all, and he knew that Ramanuja was spreading Vaishnavism like anything, and he was envious of that, and so he what he did was he decided that he would capture Ramanuja, and he would force Ramanuja to sign a piece of paper saying that Shiva is greater than Vishnu or Shiva is supreme, so that he could just show that even Ramanuja thinks that Shiva is supreme. But he was going to do this he was going to force Ramanuja to do this by torturing Ramanuja or by threatening Ramanuja in some way. So what happened was, of course, Ramanuja escaped by changing clothes with his disciple Kuresha, Kuradalwan, who was a grihasta. So Ramanuja, wearing white cloth instead of the traditional saffron or orange gera cloth of the sannyasi, he left that place and he went to Karnataka, and he was actually in exile for many years in Karnataka, in Melkote, which is another, to this day, the center of Sri Vaishnavism in Karnataka. So, but what happened to Kuresha and also to Periyanambi, who is Ramanuja's Diksha Guru, they were taken before the king of Tanjore, and this king of Tanjore tortured them, and in fact blinded them. So both of them had their eyes burned or put out, and they were blinded. Periyanambi or Mahapurna, Ramanuja's Diksha Guru, in fact succumbed to that torture and died as a result of it. Whereas Kuradalwan or Kuresha, Ramanuja's main disciple, actually survived this. He survived this, but he was blind. He was blinded by the king. But he never said anything bad about the king, even after he had been blinded by the king. And in fact, Ramanuja, on his return from exile after the king died, Ramanuja, of course, understood that his disciple Kuradalwar had been blinded by the king of Tanjore, and he wished that Lord Ranganatha would give the sight back to his disciple. But so he ordered his disciple Kuresha to pray to Lord Ranganatha to give his sight back. But in fact, Kuradalwar just simply prayed for the emancipation, prayed for the liberation of the king who had done that to him, who had tortured him. And when Ramanuja heard that, he thought this is very amazing that even after being abused so much by this king, he tolerated that, and he didn't even criticize the king, and in fact prayed for the benediction of the king. And Sita also restrained, in this example here, Mother Sita also restrained Hanuman from punishing these female demons that had been guarding her in the Ashoka forest. So this is to give us these examples. There are other examples in other forms of Vaishnavism. There are people who have been abused. In Gaudiya Vaishnavism, there's a story of Haridas Thakur who was beaten in so many marketplaces, and there are so many down through the ages, so many histories of Vaishnavas who have been abused, and they tolerated. They had forbearance and they tolerated this, and they never complained about these things. So, coming right after the section on criticism, we have this section of tolerance. And I think out of all religions in the world, the Hindu religion is known for its tolerance. So many people, so many different parties have conquered India over the years, and that's the history. But somehow or other, the Hindus have tolerated all of this. So it's a common trait of tolerance in Hinduism, but specifically in Vaishnavism, we should tolerate all these abuses at the hands of others. So, continuing on, has it not been said that even the all-knowing one, that means the Lord, Sriman Narayana, who has the right to make known faults, does not open his mouth, but conceals all things? So the Supreme Lord incarnates periodically to liberate sentient beings, right? We know this from the Bhagavad Gita. He says, Yada yada hi dharmasya glani bhavati bharata abhutanam dharmasya tadatmanam sugamyaham paritranaya sadhunam vinashaya chidaskritam dharma samsthapanarthayam sambhavami yuge yuge. Yuge yuge means from time to time or age after age. I advent myself. I come as in different incarnations, and I establish religion, and I protect the godly people, and I destroy the ungodly people, like that. So to liberate sentient beings. And even during these periodic descents to the material world, there are those who are outright hostile towards him. So, for instance, in the Krishna's avatar, we have the story of Shishupal, who basically was cursing Krishna up to 100 times, and Krishna, tolerated that. He tolerated 99 times, and then on the 100th time, Krishna cut his head off and liberated him. But anyway, so there are people who oppose the Lord when he comes. There are people who oppose the Vaishnavas when they come, when they preach about the Lord. So they oppose him in every way, even waging war against him. So we had the examples of when Lord Krishna came. He established himself in Mathura, and there was so much fighting against him after he established himself in Mathura that he actually moved his capital to Dwarka, to a different place, because there was so much enmity by people attacking Mathura. Yet, he returns to Vaikuntha and never complains for a moment, even to his consorts. So, all of these things, of course, all of this fighting against the Lord happens in this material world, which is called Leela Vibhuti. So these are all what we call Leelas, or pastimes or plays that the Lord puts on. But these are not to be seen in Vaikuntha. In Sri Vaikuntha or Paramapada, the supreme destination, the eternal abode of the Lord, we don't see any enmity, we don't see any opposition by people towards the Lord. That is only here in this material world, because we can only oppose the Lord if we're in ignorance, if we don't know our true nature and his true nature. When we know his true nature, we understand that he is God, and he owns and controls everything. When we know our true nature, we understand that we are his eternal servants, we are his eternal slaves, and we are meant to serve him. So when we know these things, then there's not going to be any enmity between the living being and God when the living being is in full knowledge. Of course, God is always in full knowledge. So even when he comes here, he's not in illusion. But we are in illusion. We are covered by ignorance. And so only in this material world, when we're covered by ignorance, either because of our unlimited beginningless karma, or karmas because of sinful activities, or even because the Lord may put us in some ignorance like that. So there may be so many persons that come to perform also the pastimes with the Lord, even fight with the Lord, like Jai and Vijay, his eternal Dwarapalakas, or security guards in the gates of heaven, or Vaikuntha. They came down and they took 3 births as Hiranyakashipu and Hiranyaksha, as Ravana and Kumbhakarna, and as Dantavakra and Shishupal, in the 3 descents in these 3 births, to fight against the Lord, because the Lord came and he desires to have his Leela, he likes to have his play, and he likes to engage in this mock fighting with people, which he can't do in Sri Vaikuntha because everyone's in perfect knowledge there. So when the living beings are here, they can be covered over by Maya, which means illusion, and because they have their knowledge is covered, they are unable to understand their true nature as the servant of God and God's true nature as their only master. So, yes, even waging war against him. Yet, still he returns to Vaikuntha and never complains to his consorts. Why would he complain to his consorts? He actually comes here, they come here also, and they enjoy this. They enjoy many pastimes here, but but specifically the pastimes they're talking about here are the pastimes of enmity, the pastimes of war, the pastimes of fighting with other living beings, which normally in Sri Vaikuntha, that's the normal situation. They would never experience that because everybody is subservient to the Lord in Sri Vaikuntha, or his eternal associates. Still, when he returns to Vaikuntha and never complains for a moment to his consorts and eternal associates about the stupidity, hostility, and obstinacy of his recalcitrant subjects. Yes, recalcitrant subjects. That's what we are here in this material world. We are we are doing everything against God, whatever he says or whatever he gives us. Whenever he comes down to see us and to try and shower his mercy upon us, we don't want it and we reject it, and we have enmity or against him. So that's just the way things are in the material world. So continuing on, but still he doesn't reveal that when he goes back to Vaikuntha. We don't see him being angry about that. In fact, he enjoys to come and to participate in those leelas. So continuing on, Sutra 365. One should respond to those who offend, right? So this is a Pilokacharya is now, he's explaining that how should we respond if somebody offends us. Many times we hear people say, oh, you offended me, or they won't even say it, but they'll appear to be offended like that. Offense is in the mind of the person who is offended, right? Sometimes we slight somebody or we say something that offends somebody and we don't even know it. So we should be very careful with how we deal with other living beings, especially with Vaishnavas and servants of the Lord. So one should respond to those who offend with tolerance, compassion, a smile, joy, and gratitude. Tolerance to such an extent as not to bear any ill will or malice or grudge against the offender. So that's the first thing. The first thing is if somebody offends you, or if something offends you like that, you should take it as a lesson. You should try to not bear any ill will towards that person, or to hold on to that for a long period of time, which is called holding a grudge, and keep that within your mind all the time. You should try to dismiss it. Just tolerance means you have to dismiss it. In the Bible, I believe Jesus says that if somebody slaps you on the cheek, you have to turn the other cheek. Yes, go ahead, slap me on the other cheek as well. I deserve it, no problem. So be very humble. We talked about humility before, and simply tolerate the offense. Simply tolerate the offense. Compassion as an act of openness and acceptance for one who is deluded by the forces of ignorance and bound by the law of karma. So we have to have compassion for all living entities. Why? Because every one of us in this material world is in ignorance or ajnana. We don't know our true nature as eternal servants of the Lord. And therefore, you can't expect people who are in ignorance. Of course, there's a saying, ignorance is no excuse for the law. So there are laws that the Lord lays down in this material world, and if we break those laws, or if we sin, then we will suffer the effects of those sins. But at the same time, we don't for a person who's ignorant of those laws, or who has ignorance in any way. So we have to be compassionate. So we have to be compassionate if somebody offends us. We have to be being compassionate towards them means understanding that they didn't really know, or thinking at least. Even if it seems like the person offended us on purpose, we should try to negate that, and we should try to think, no, the only reason why he offended me, or they offended me, is that they're in ignorance, that they are bound by the laws of karma, and that they're just lashing out in that way. So we should be compassionate towards them, towards people who offend us even. The next point he says is a smile for the foolishness of the doer who is contemplating hurting one who is beyond all bodily conceptions, and for whom all suffering is perceived only as a recondite karmic reaction. Okay, so actually, when somebody offends us, or somebody tries to offend, like that, it's a little bit of a laughing matter, because if we don't think that we are this body, if we don't think that we are we have some position in this material world, or if we don't have exaggerated false ego, if we don't have this false ego, then there's nothing to offend. There is nothing to offend. You can't offend me. Why can't you offend me? You can't offend me because I know that I am the lowest of the low. I am the lowliest servant of the Lord. And so if we have supreme humility, we'll understand this. Nobody can offend me because already I'm on a very low position. And so why would I think that I'm to be offended? So it's sort of, for a person who actually sees the reality that he is completely dependent and subservient to the Lord, he doesn't need to be offended by people criticizing or trying to offend him in some way because of his situation here in this world. Joy at receiving the quota of pain that is due for past unskillful actions. Unskillful actions. This is a nice way of saying sins, right? Done and knowing that another debt has been settled. I say, so we actually should be happy if somebody tries to offend us or offends us. Then we can think, oh, this is just the Lord giving us what is due to us for our past sins, like that. So in some way, we were meant to suffer much more. We were meant to suffer more in hell than this, but we're getting a little bit of a hellish situation because we're getting some trouble from other living entities. Other beings are offending us in some way. So we should actually be happy and think, oh, this is good. This is helping me to shed my false ego and helping me also to get rid of my burden of karma. And gratitude for being reminded of one's failings and faults. If somebody, the keeping under constant review, which is one's personal duty. So as we saw before, self-reflection is very important. We should look and we should try to judge our own selves and see, what we are understanding and and how we're acting in this material world. Are we acting like a servant to the Lord? Are we acting completely dependent upon the Lord? Are we thinking like that? And we should always try to reflect and try to do better in our lives. When we wake up in the morning, we always think we've wasted our life. Up until this day, we've wasted our life. And now with this new day dawning, let us try to do better. Let us try to fully engage in the service of the Lord, which is the Sri Vaisnava definition of liberation: eternal service or kainkariya to the Lord. That whether it be here in this material world or whether it be in Vaikuntha. So we should have gratitude to others when they point out our faults. We should not be offended by that. If somebody wants to tell me, oh, this is a mistake that you made, or this is something you've got wrong, or this is how you could be better, like that, then you should take it. Chanakya Pandit again says you can take a wife even if she's born in a low family. He says you can take a good wife. You can take gold even from a filthy place, right? You can, if you see some gold, you're going to pick it up even from a filthy place, right? Or you can take good instruction even from a child. So if a child comes up to me and says, no, actually you should do like this, you're not doing this correctly, or why are you thinking like that? If anybody points out some fault in you, take it with gratitude. Take it with gratitude. Take it as being constructive to you, to help you, right? Take them as being like your master, like your guru, like that. We saw before that Pila Lakacharya was saying all Vaishnavas are like guru. They're like your guru, and you respect them like that. So whenever somebody says something to you, even if they're not a Vaishnava, but if they have a valid point and they take the criticism and use that criticism to help yourself become a better person. So this is a very interesting sutra here, like that. We should all try to take this. Of course, it's not possible. It's very difficult to take all these things all the time to heart at every second, and we may also see Vaishnavas in the process of preaching to people. Sometimes we do have to criticize them, and we try to do it in a constructive way. But the previous section was about criticism. And now we get this. Now we should not only try not to criticize others, but now what he's saying is, when others criticize you, this is how you have to understand it. This is how you have to take it. So continuing on, we're going to have this next section about self-analysis. We were touching on this a little bit in the previous section about how to accept criticism. And if we're always self-analyzing, that's the best position that we can be in. And this is normally when you meet Vaishnavas in India or any place, the really advanced Vaishnavas, they'll be very self-critical. At the same time, they'll be very liberal with other persons. With other people, they'll always give them the benefit of the doubt. They won't want to criticize others. But for themselves, they'll be very critical. And then if you see the exact opposite, then you know that person is not very advanced in spiritual life. If you look at that and you see people who are constantly, they're just criticizing others, but they don't see their own faults at all. They don't look in the mirror and say, oh, how could I do better? Like that. Those people are not so advanced. So we try to cultivate this quality of self-analysis, of self-criticism, constructive criticism, and try to avoid criticism of others. But at the same time, we can tell them we can give them some critical, some constructive criticism to help them also to advance. And hopefully, if they're advanced enough, they'll be able to take that and accept that, like that. It's always very, you always have to see, you have to judge other people, and you have to see, are they able to take the criticism? If I tell somebody something, are they able to accept it, the criticism? If my wife criticizes me, then sometimes I think I'm not able to take her criticism, like that. But maybe some other, if my guru tells me some criticism. But no, we should see all Vaishnavas as being our guides and our gurus, our teachers, and therefore we can accept criticism from anywhere, as long as it's valid criticism. If it's not valid criticism, of course, we have to understand where the person is not being correct and not understanding exactly, and we have to have compassion on that person. So with self-analysis, Sutra 366, reflecting on one's own faults. Reflecting on one's own faults causes anxiety. Contemplating on the virtues of the Lord gives rise to a feeling of security. Okay? So there are many religions around the world that are based on guilt and fear, and they keep the members of those religions in line. The leaders of those religions keep people in line by emphasizing this, that you should be God-fearing, you should have guilt because you're all sinners, and the whole atmosphere of that religion is that we have done so many sins, and that we are constantly understood to be sinners, and therefore we should feel guilty. And this simply puts people in anxiety. Similarly, if we follow other paths of religion, like paths of effort, like Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, and Bhakti Yoga, which are also described in the scriptures, like Bhagavad Gita and other scriptures by the Lord, right? They're bona fide paths of self-effort on the way. Instead of following property, if we follow those paths of self-efforts, there are so many instructions and so many qualifications that we have to come up to, so many efforts that we have to put, difficult sadhanas fasting and doing so many, taking so many vows, performing so many rituals, doing so many things. There are so many things that we have to do in order to fulfill those systems of self-effort. That when we fall short a little bit, then we get into great anxiety. An example would be when perhaps there are some sects of Vaishnavism where people are supposed to perform great fasts, great austerities, maybe chanting many mantras as a minimum every day, having to chant a lot of mantras, having to follow strict rules of conduct according to the Dharma Shastras and different things like that. So these are all given. These are all there in the Shastras, and they're methods. But since Vilalokacharya is talking about property doesn't require, there's no prerequisites for property, there's no qualifications for property. As we saw before, the only qualification is who we surrender to, and that has to be Sriman Narayana. But there are no other prerequisites or pre-qualifications. So the thing is, if you follow a path that is full of prerequisites and full of pre-qualifications, then if you can't actually reach that qualification, then you are feeling an anxiety. Contemplating the virtues of the Lord gives rise to a feeling of security. So the virtue of this is what we call having Mahavishvasha, or great faith. This is one of the angas of property, is Mahavishvasha. Mahavishvasha means having great faith that the Lord can save us. So we feel akinchana, we feel we feel helpless and hopeless in our situation because we can't come up to the standard that the Lord wants of us as being proper servants of His. But still, so that may cause us that's a feeling which may cause us a little bit of anxiety. But by thinking about the unlimited auspicious qualities of the Lord, the greatest of which is, of course, that He has unlimited mercy to give us and to save us. So by doing that, we feel secure. So we have great faith that He will save us. In Sutras 358 to 362, the Venerable Teacher stated that we should reflect upon our own faults and shortcomings and upon the glory of the Lord. Now we are told that contemplating upon our own faults gives rise to anxiety. So it's a good thing to contemplate our faults a little bit, but not to be completely consumed by thoughts of guilt and fault, right, and sin. So if we're completely consumed by that, how can we live our lives? How can we open our hearts to the understanding of the compassion of the Lord, right? So it's all right to think a little bit about our faults in order to start the day, but then we should move on and we should move to more positive things. To be always negative and to be always thinking of faults like that is not a good thing. It's not the way that Vaishnavas live their lives. And Vaishnavism is not a religion, a guilt-ridden religion like the Semitic religions of Judaism, Islam, and Christianity. It's not like that at all. So similarly, any other type of Vaishnavism, apart from Sri Vaishnavism, that focuses mostly on the fact that one has to do a particular thing, one has to come up to a particular standard, one has to be pre-qualified and exerts huge efforts to meet the standard. This is also going to eventually lead to people having this mentality of guilt. So it's a guilt-ridden religion. Sri Vaishnavism is not a guilt-ridden religion at all. We can definitely look at our own faults, and we should definitely self-analyze. But we shouldn't constantly be consumed by this guilt-ridden attitude. The term used here is dosha anusandhana, which means making an obsession making an obsession of researching one's own faults. If I want to look at my faults, of course, my sins go back, birth after birth, anadi karma, beginning to the beginningless karma. I have beginningless sins, which are heaped upon me. And this is what Arjuna was thinking in the Bhagavad Gita. At the end of Bhagavad Gita, he was still thinking that, the Lord has explained to me these paths of karma yoga, jnana yoga, and bhakti yoga, but still I feel the burden of unlimited, countless, beginningless sin on me. I feel that burden. How then can I take to these paths? Because I'm being stopped I'm being blocked by all this guilt. And Lord Krishna says, Masujaha, don't worry. Sarva papebhyo mokshayishyami. I will liberate you from sarva papebhyo. All sinful reactions, past, present, and future sins are all gone if you simply surrender to me. If you give up this idea of struggling very hard, sarva dharman prityaja, reject and give up all these struggling very hard efforts to save yourself by karma yoga, jnana yoga, bhakti yoga, by any of these paths of effort. Please give them up and simply surrender unto me, and I'll save you from the fear of all these karmas. Lord Rama also says in the Ramcharma sloka, Sakrideva Prapannaya, just once only once you have to just admit the truth about yourself and say, I am yours. Tavasmiti Tayachite Abhayam Sarvabhutebhyo. I will protect you from the fear of all things. Fear of all things. Fear of rebirth, fear of sin, fear of all living beings. Any fears that you have, I will totally protect you from those things, and therefore I will make you my own. Of course, we do belong to Sriman Narayana. We are his, right? That is the reality. So it's just simply a recognition of reality that we're his, and then he will protect us just like he protects all his property, and everything is his property. So he's a protector of all. We just simply have to realize that. So we should not have this obsession of researching all our faults, because that is endless. If like the Christians say, we're all sinners, and why would we go into the details of all the sins that we've committed, or we're going to commit, or are committing at the present time? Past, present, and future sins. Why obsess about these things, right? That is simply going to end up with your life is going to be totally guilt-ridden, and you're not going to be able to move forward with positive service to the Lord. One can be so obsessed with thinking negatively on oneself that guilt in Westerners and anxiety arise, which then cloud the clarity of the mind and obstruct the seeing of one's true nature and the relationship to the Lord, the world, and other sentient beings. The anxiety is based on hopelessness. Now, it's good. Hopelessness is good. It's good to feel hopeless and to feel helpless, right? We do feel that. We do feel that in as prapanas. We feel the prapana means refugee, a person who takes refuge to the Lord. The refugee has nothing, and therefore he feels completely helpless and hopeless. So that is good. Feeling of worthlessness and inability to achieve a hypothetical ideal standard of perfection. So a little bit of that anxiety like that is a good thing. But still, it has to be overcome by the great faith that the Lord will save us. On the other hand, changing the focus of the mind from one's imperfect ego to the qualities of the divine gives rise to positive feelings of love, joy, compassion, and enthusiasm. That's what we want. So in Sri Vaishnavism, the Guru may say to you, you ask the Guru, oh, should I fast? Should I chant? Should I do all these things? Should I follow this rule? Should I follow that rule? And the Guru is never going to impress you and tell you to do something that you cannot do. He wants to encourage you. We want to be encouraged to do devotional acts. We want to encourage to study the scriptures. We want to be encouraged to do so many things. right? While we're waiting for Sriman Narayana to bless us with the eternal service in Vaikuntha at the end of this life. So we're waiting for that. We're in the waiting room. So we want to act nicely, and we want to follow the Lord and serve Him like that. So you can encourage people to do those things, to do acts of karma, jnana, and bhakti. You can encourage people to do those things. But at the same time, if you mandate that they do those things, then all of a sudden those things become a burden to those people. And if they become obsessed with those burdens, and they become completely overcome in their mind and their whole existence with those burdens, because they can't come up perfectly to the standard, then it becomes simply a life of regret and a life of guilt and a life of obsession with sin. And this is not what we want. This is very, very negative. And this is completely not what we want as Prapanas. As we want to realize that we're sinners. We want to realize that we're fallen. At the same time, we want to accept the great joy and great enthusiasm to serve the Lord that comes from knowing that He has total compassion for us and He is going to save us. That is the great faith that we have. So continuing on, the guiding principle is yad bhavati tad bhavati. What one contemplates, one becomes. So if you consume yourself, if your whole life is consumed with thinking about sin, thinking about how wrong you are and all these sort of things like that, you will simply be morose. You will not be happy. And the Lord wants you to be happy. And the way that you become happy is by understanding your true nature as a servant to Him and by engaging in that service. So continuing on with Sutra 367, if the cause of fear and the cause of fearlessness were reversed, it would only perpetuate ignorance. If one avoids contemplating on the Lord for fear of punishment for past sins in the way of karma and continued bondage in samsara, or attempts to resolve this anxiety by concentrating one's efforts on self-salvation, it would be a folly that would only serve to perpetuate the cycle. So, if we constantly thinking, instead of thinking the Lord will save us, it's okay to think we're helpless and hopeless and the Lord will save us. But if we think that, no, the Lord is going to punish us for all our past sins, look, we're such sinners like that, and therefore He's going to punish us and keep us here in the material world, in samsara, and therefore if we get anxiety because of this, right, then it'll be very difficult for us to concentrate on the mercy of the Lord, on the compassion of the Lord, and we'll end up concentrating very hard on doing those on performing those paths of effort of karma yoga, working very hard, studying very hard, doing many devotional acts, that ultimately we fail to do perfectly, and again we'll be disappointed, and again we'll be morose, and again we'll be guilt-ridden, and that will consume our lives, and that will be a perpetual cycle that will keep us here in the material world. We have to give up that. We have to give up that mentality. Sutra 368. If it be objected, what then is the basis for the following utterances? And here are some utterances. Do you cause me distress? Number one. And I am always full of fear like a tree growing on the bank of a river. So these come from Tiruvai 711 and Peritirumoli 11.8.1. In the first quotation, it said, "O my sweet Lord, great benefactor adored by the gods, you have mire immeasurable at your disposal. O Lord, on whom the three worlds are dependent, why do you cause me distress, tormenting me still, by not giving me access to your lotus-like feet? and by exposing me to the 5 unruly senses, so as to stay perpetually bound. And Periyatirumoli 11.8.1 says, O God, who is perceived by smell, taste, touch, and sound, even if you can say many things to me, I will tell you only one. I am always terrified, like a tree on the bank of a river, thinking that you may cause me future human births. So another image that we know of in Vaisnava poetry is like water on a lotus leaf. So when there's water on a lotus leaf is impenetrable. Water can't penetrate the lotus leaf. So when you put a drop of water on the leaf, it's in a very precarious situation. So here in Peritirumoli, he's talking about a tree on the bank of a river. Sometimes we see a tree is growing on the bank of the river, and the tree, you know, the roots can be undermined by the water of the river. So the tree can fall in the river at any time because it's on the bank, just right on the bank. So we are in a precarious situation in this material world. And that is because we are constantly being bombarded. Our senses are constantly being bombarded. Here it's talking about in both of these quotations, talking about the senses. Our senses are constantly being bombarded. And we feel that we are under an onslaught of being bombarded by different material things, our senses, and that's keeping us here in the material world because our senses are constantly look here, taste this, touch this, smell this, like that. If we, however, change our situation to where we're seeing and tasting and touching and feeling things in relationship to the Lord, and if we can see it like that, then there's no problem. But more often than not, we feel that this material world there's an onslaught of material nature, of the Lord's Maya, material nature on us. And we have to react properly to that. So the idea given in the previous sutras about the cause of fear and the cause of fearlessness being reversed will only perpetuate ignorance. So here we understand that the Alwars are speaking this. They're talking about the different senses and being bombarded with sense information, with information to the different senses, sense data, and so this can be a cause of bondage, but it can also be a cause of enlightenment too, if we see it in the way. So the question is, why do the Alwars express anxiety then, if they're indeed absorbed in contemplation of Parimal, of Sriman Narayana? So this is the question. But these Alwars, they seem to be saying, you know, we're in anxiety. Why are you keeping us in this material world being bombarded with all this sense information, which takes us away from you? But still, we're trying to meditate upon your lotus feet. We're trying to meditate upon you, but we feel like a tree on the bank of a river that is in a precarious situation because of all this sense gratification. So continuing on, they are totally mindful of their relationship to the Lord. So, of course, the Alwars, they're completely immersed in their relationship to the Lord as the servants of the Lord. The anxiety of insecurity, like this, we were talking about the tree being on the bank of the river. The anxiety of insecurity that is expressed by the Alwars stems from their total awareness of their relationship with the Lord and does not contradict it. So sometimes there is anxiety. We see there is anxiety in the great devotees, but we should not mistake that as being the ordinary anxiety of people who do not understand their relationship with the Lord. As a child stumbling in the street beats its mother for failing to prevent the fall, so one can speak that way to one whose kinship is unconditional, in other words, the Lord, Srimad Narayana, and who has the power to prevent suffering, but does not prevent it. So we may blame God. We may say, well, why has God placed me in this material world? Why am I suffering here in this material world? If the Lord is able to prevent my suffering, why doesn't he prevent my suffering? So this is compared here to a child who blames the mother, stumbles in the street, but blames the mother for not preventing that fall. So we should not think like this, because this is an immature, this is a childish understanding that the Lord, we should also not blame the Lord for our suffering here in this material world. If the mother does not prevent her child from straying to the edge of a well, and the child falls in, others will say that the mother herself is to blame. If the mother's failure to remove the child from the edge of the well can be construed as permission for it to stay there, and therefore implicates the mother in any misadventure, then one could argue that the failure of the Lord to remove the prapana from samsara is permission for one to remain in samsara, and therefore implicates the Lord in one's continued suffering. So, when we surrender to the Lord, there's this artha property and dripta property. So, when a person feels so intensely that he prays to the Lord and he surrenders to the Lord and he says, Lord, take me now. Let me give up my body now. Please take me to Vaikuntha and engage me in your eternal service. I can't spend 1 second more here in this material world separated from you. So that is a type of property. And then there's another type of property where the person is not blaming the Lord for placing himself here in the material world, or not taking me back until the end of this life. And one is very patiently awaiting the end of this lifetime, when the Lord will save the person and take him to his eternal service in Sri Vaikuntha. So, we should not take the fact that the Lord hasn't taken us to Vaikuntha. We think, oh, we've performed properly, we've surrendered to the Lord. At least we've gone through the motions externally of doing that. So we shouldn't think that the Lord is leaving us here in samsara, and then he's therefore giving us permission to stay here in this material world and continue sinning. No, he's not giving us permission to do those things. Right? Just like the child is not being given permission to jump into the well just because the child is there on the edge of the well. So we can't blame the Lord. We don't blame the Lord for not taking us immediately to Sri Vaikuntha. So continuing on. 372. As the ascent of this one, the jiva, is not the cause of gain. Remember we talked about this, the real gain in moksha is not to the jiva, but is to the Lord, because the Lord lost his property. The jiva stole away himself from the Lord, and the gain therefore of liberation is to the Lord, because he gets his property back. Right? As the ascent of this one, the jiva, is not the cause of gain. So going to moksha is not the cause of gain for the jiva, right? So also the ascent of the Lord, of him, the Lord, is not the cause of loss. By surrendering, one does not bring about one's salvation, because salvation comes from the Lord's grace alone. and not through anything that the jiva could do. Okay, so some people, when they start learning about property, they think, okay, property is just like another means. It's just another means. Karma yoga is a means, jnana yoga is a means, bhakti yoga is a means. These are all just means. And property is also a means. It's a means to liberation. And therefore you go through the motion. Lord Rama says, say, I am yours once only, and you'll be liberated. And so you have to do something, and you have to, the soul has to actually do something. But in previously in Sri Vacana Bhushana, it was explained in the beginning of Sri Vacana Bhushana about how property is not like a means like other means. It's not a means, actually. We think of it as a means, but it's not really a means. It's simply a recognition that we are the eternal servants of God. A recognition that returning the stolen property to God. We are that stolen property. And so we should not think that, oh, I've done property and that property is the means for my liberation. No, the Lord himself is actually the means. Remember, we talked about controlling the mind, controlling the senses. One attains an acharya. The acharya will give you the Astakshara mantra and help you to perform property. And you perform property through the acharya, through the mediation of the acharya and Goddess Lakshmi. And then the Lord himself. So these are the primary causes of or the initial causes, let's say, the initial causes of liberation, right? But the actual primary and main cause of liberation is the Lord himself. The Lord himself is the means. He is the means. So it's not anything that we do, which is the means. It's him. It's all him. So it is his grace alone, and not through anything that the jiva can do. Not even going through the rituals and the externals and even the internals of property. No. And likewise, the ascent of the Lord for the jiva to remain in samsara is not the cause of the jiva's suffering. So just because the Lord hasn't liberated us now, this minute, or the very minute that we say, I'm yours, right, does not mean that he is continuing to let us suffer in this material world. That is our karma. We have to suffer that karma. We're going to continue on in this material world, and of course, the Lord can take us at any time, but still, we cannot see our continued existence in this material world as some punishment from the Lord. It's not. It isn't. It isn't the cause. It's the cause. The cause of our suffering is not the Lord. The cause of our suffering is only ourselves. So, continuing on, the two ascents are natural to both. Right. So, the ascent of the self to be liberated by the Lord, and the ascent of the Lord for the Chaitanya to stay a while in samsara are perfectly in accordance with their respective natures, and thus are not the causes of these consequences. Okay? In case we would think to criticize the Lord for keeping us here in this material world to the end of this lifetime, or in case we would think that what we are doing is the cause of our own liberation. So we should understand the true nature of the self and the true nature of the Lord, and we'll understand that these things are natural. So continuing on, we have this next section about karma and grace. So we've been talking a little bit about the compassion of the Lord, and we've also been talking about the fact that we have beginningless karma. So karma results in suffering. Grace brings about liberation. Although the Lord gives permission for the jiva to remain in samsara, he also expects the jiva to obey the dictates of the scriptures and to follow Dharma, and thus accumulate merit, which leads one back to Godhead. But the Chaitanas, or the living beings, become totally immersed in samsara, abhinivesh, and give themselves up to cravings, raga, and aversion, dvesha, which are the causes of more karma and thus perpetual rebirth. In spite of this, the Lord still shows his grace upon the undeserving chetanas, or living beings, and eventually extricates them out from the ocean of samsara. Okay, so this is pretty straightforward. The Lord does give permission for us to stay here in samsara. He's not forcing us to stay here, though. We have the choice to stay here or not. When we find out that we are his eternal servants, and we realize that, then that is going to be when he brings us back to his eternal service in Vaikuntha. So speaking otherwise is detrimental. I think it's very, very, very clear here that karma results in suffering, and grace brings about liberation. So speaking otherwise is detrimental. To put it another way, to accuse the Lord of being despotic by keeping the jivas bound in samsara and declaring that any spiritual advancement is due to their efforts is to alienate oneself from the Lord. Right. So sometimes people think this. They think, okay, I have an adhikama, I've got a beginningless sin attached to me. I'm here in this material world. I've been put here by the Lord, and only by my efforts, by my personal efforts, am I able to try to get myself free from this situation. And this is sort of alienating yourself from the Lord. I'll give you the example once more of the drowning person. There's a person who's drowning, and then there's a lifeguard. There's somebody who wants to save that person. So the lifeguard always wants to save the person who's drowning, but the person who's drowning alienates himself from the lifeguard. If he tries to save himself and he becomes hysterically flailing, flapping around in the water, trying to save himself, where he can't save himself, instead of allowing the approach of the lifeguard to help him, the lifeguard will stand off and he'll say, wait, I'll just wait until he calms down, until he's no longer hysterical, until he tires himself out. The Lord is like that. The Lord sees us trying karma yoga, jnana yoga, bhakti yoga, trying all these different paths of effort, struggling very hard to get out from the ocean of samsara ourselves. And that alienates him. They said, yes, I've given those paths to you. If you want to try those things, try those things. So recently I suggested this is like a lifeguard throwing life preservers to the person. You throw a life ring or a flotation device, you throw it to the person who's drowning. And the person can save themselves by grabbing hold of those things and floating and not drowning. But the person has to struggle very hard to do that. And they have to have the right mentality also. They can't be panicked. If the person is hysterical and panicked, the person is not going to grab hold of the life ring and is not going to save himself. So if the person just continues panicking and struggling very hard to use these things and they don't work, then the lifeguard has to go and personally save the person, has to dive into the water and save that person. But the lifeguard will not approach that person while that person is hysterically struggling. Will not. The lifeguard will wait until the person has either tired themselves out or calmed down a little bit enough that he can be approached. So that's the thing in this material world. We have to realize our situation. We have to calm down. We have to stop struggling so hard by our own efforts. And the only way that will happen is when we realize our efforts are not the cause of our liberation. So our grabbing at the life rings is not going to save us. Our frantically trying to keep our head above the water is not going to save us from drowning. We simply have to submit to the care of the lifeguard, the person who's come to save us, the person who loves us is going to save us, right? But we have to let him save us. The kitten cannot struggle. The mother cat will come and pick the kitten up and take it to safety. The kitten doesn't have to do anything, right? Whereas the other situation, the paths of self-effort, karma yoga, jnana yoga, and bhakti yoga, these are which we have to make hard efforts. Like the baby monkey has to grasp hold of the back of the mother and has to hang on very tight, otherwise he'll fall off. It's the effort of the baby in the case of the mother monkey and the baby monkey. In the case of the cat, the mother cat does all the effort. God does all the effort in the system of causeless grace of the Tenacharya Sampradaya. So the mother cat will just simply pick up the kitten. The jiva does nothing. The jiva just simply has to stop struggling. How do we stop struggling? By realizing our true nature as eternally subservient and dependent upon the Lord. So Pila Lokacharya uses another simile to describe this paradoxical dynamic. Two persons jointly own a property. The one is an expert in real estate investment and the other is a novice. The novice decides to sell the property in order to speculate. The senior partner knows that it's a bad idea and decides to give his consent in order to enable the junior partner to learn from his mistakes. The venture fails miserably. Who is to blame? It was the junior partner who conceived of the project, planned and executed it. The senior partner merely gave his assent, but in fact had no direct involvement. The Chaitana, or the living being, initiates the karma, but the Lord, as the overself, simply gives his consent. The karma and its fruit are the Chaitanas alone, right? So this example is given by Pila Lokacharya. Two people own a property, right? In a sense, it's not really exactly analogous to the soul and God, because the soul doesn't own himself. God owns the soul. But let's say there are two people, they own a piece of property, and the one person has a lot of real estate knowledge, and they know now is not the time to sell. We will not sell. We will not get a profit if we sell right now. And the other person, this actually happened to me. All right, I had a partner. We bought a property like that. It was a rental apartment, a vacation rental apartment. We bought it, and he was a silent partner. He didn't know much about real estate. I knew about real estate. I bought the property. I fixed up the property. I rented the property. He then got jittery and he said, no, we have to now sell the property at the wrong time. And we sold it and we made very little money, and therefore, he suffered because he was putting in a lot of the money. So who is to blame for that? You can't blame God for this. You can't blame the senior partner in this property analogy. That person has more knowledge, but because the junior partner didn't know, he had no knowledge, he forced the senior to allow him to sell the property at a loss. So what are we doing? We're constantly in this material world. We're doing different things. We're forcing God to let us do these. We can't do anything without the will of the Lord. The Lord has to consent to us doing anything. So even if we want to go and do something sinful, the Lord has to allow us to go do that. Not a blade of grass moves without the will of the Lord. So he's allowing us. Why is he allowing us to do sins? So we may say he's at fault, right? I didn't want to murder that person. I didn't want to do that sin, but the Lord allowed me to do it. Therefore, it's his fault. No, this is wrong. This is wrong. Just because you're ignorant and you don't know it's a sin and you do it, or just because the Lord allows you to do a sin, doesn't mean the fault goes to him. The fault stays with you. So this is we've understood this idea before. Continuing on, who wants to rescue a person who stood near him at a well and fell in, and who then complains he was pushed in? So some people are like this. They say, well, if God Why did God create this material world? Why does God punish us and put us in this material world? As the Lord, out of compassion, reaches out his hand to save the jiva should not then accuse him of causing the bondage in the first place, but accept the causes which led to his bondage as his own. Right? So, the example in the sutra is somebody standing by a well, two people standing by a well, and one person falls in. And then once he's fallen in, he says, "You pushed me." To the other, he looks up to God and says, "You pushed me, you put me here." Like that. He blames God for this. So we can't blame God for what is our own fault. This idea is conveyed by Alwar, right? By the Alwar, after saying that would anger, and this is a quote from Periya Tirumoli 11.8.2. Tirumangai Alwar shows awareness of that the Lord is angry with him, with his complaining. "O God, skillful wielder of the discus, even if I have committed offenses that would anger you, let me tell you one thing. I stand trembling, like the mind of the navigator's caught in a storm, with the fear that you may make me take birth in human forms." So he's just showing, he's just complaining a little bit because he thinks that the Lord is going to be angry with him, and is going to keep him here in this material world, taking rebirth in different forms. Continuing on, if it be said, if he, Tirumangai Alwar, was aware of anger on the part of the Lord, then how is it that he expressed the previous anxiety once again? The answer is that the grace of the Lord and the relentlessness and helplessness of the jiva give occasion to such expression. Even though he may be angry, all these things are said by the Alwar, since he knows that there is a way out by embracing the Lord's feet. The Alwar knew that the Lord's anger could easily be overcome by his boundless compassion elicited by grasping his feet or surrendering to him. Thus, he could not restrain himself from crying out in anguish at separation from the beloved, and thus risking his anger. So, the Alwar understands that the Lord is compassionate, and that simply by surrendering to him, by grasping his feet, that everything will turn out all right and he'll be pardoned. But still, he can't help himself crying out in anguish of separation. And by actually making an expression saying that maybe you're going to continue leaving me here in this material world. This is an expression of love here. Continuing on, pardoned by grace and by extreme anger. So we're getting a couple of quotations here from Ramayana and from Kulashekara Alwar's Paramal Tirumoli 5.1. So in the Ramayana it says, the descendant of Kakutsta, the protector, out of grace, pardoned the crow, right, that fell on the ground seeking refuge, though it deserved to be killed. Okay, so this is a story. This is a story about a crow. This is a reference to crow, a form assumed by Jayanta, who, desiring to make love to Sita, pecked on at her breast and made her bleed. Rama shot an arrow at it and wounded it, but then, responding to its plea of mercy, pardoned it. So even this crow that attacked Sita was pardoned by the grace of Rama. Now, first of all, though, Rama shot it, so it did experience some pain. So we're also like this. We've committed great offenses to the Supreme Lord. What's our offense? Our offense is disregarding the fact that we are completely dependent and subservient to him, and we are his property. That's our crime. That's our sin. That is, we have stolen away ourselves from the Lord, and we are his property. So that's our sin, and for that we are punished. We're here in this material world and we're being punished by karmas, just as Lord Rama shot this crow. However, ultimately, if we make a plea for mercy, what's our plea for mercy? I am yours, Lord. Lord Rama says, just say, I am yours. Or if we simply think, yes, I'm completely dependent and subservient to the Lord, that is our plea for mercy, and we'll be pardoned. Just as the crow was pardoned, even though he's a great sinner, personally attacking the goddess of fortune, Lakshmi, in the form of Sita Devi. So Rama, even then, pardoned this crow. And Kulashekara Alwar's Paramal Tirumoli 5.1 says, even if you don't prevent the grief which I must endure, there is no refuge except your feet. Even if you don't prevent the grief which I must endure. Even, what does Chaitanya Mahaprabhu say in Shikshastika 8? He says, even if you crush me by your embrace, right? If we love somebody and we embrace them, let's say they're very strong and they can crush us, they can crush our bones, right? Very strong person. So even if you, Sri Chaitanya says, even if you crush me by your embrace, still you're my worshipable Lord, birth after birth. Still I'm going to serve you, because that's my eternal constitutional position as completely dependent and completely subservient to you. So even if you don't prevent the grief that I'm enduring here in this material world, there is no refuge except for your feet. Oh, Mother. And here Kulashekara Alwar is addressing the Lord as Mother. Oh, Mother, living at Vitu Vakotu, surrounded by a garden of flowers with fragrance everywhere. If in a fit of extreme anger, the mother casts aside the child that she brought forth, yet will the child cry, thinking of her grace only. I was like that. So sometimes, examples given, sometimes the mother is nursing the child and the child bites the mother. And so the mother, casts the child aside. And then the child cries. Then the child cries. Immediately the mother takes the child back. So the mother may tell the child to do something. Don't play in the dirt. And you'll get dirty. Don't play in the mud. And the child goes and plays in the mud. And then the mother, out of her compassion, cleans the body of the child, even while scolding the child, even though the Lord might scold us and tell us, no, you did badly, you committed sins, you've done all these things like that. Some Vaishnavas might do that to us. The Lord may do us to us, may scold us like that. But even then, the love of the Lord and his devotees for the other living, the compassion that they have for all living beings, means that at the same time that they're still giving compassion and giving grace and saving these other beings, the other living beings, like that. So even though the mother is never going to give up the child, but sometimes if the child is naughty, the child has a timeout, and the mother says, "Okay, I won't see you for a little while." But eventually, when the child cries again for its mother, the mother again engages with the. So this is the same thing with the like we're talking about the cat and the kitten. The baby kitten is making a few noises, crying out for its mother. The mother comes and picks it up. So unintentional good deeds, yadrichika sukrita, as the basis of the Lord's grace. So here's a very long sutra. Well, let's have a look at this. 381. In the splendor of the three fourths, Tripad Vibhuti. Okay, so there's a Sanskrit word called Tripad Vibhuti, 3 parts. So the whole creation is unlimited. The Lord has an unlimited creation, but we can think of it as being 3/4 and 1/4. There's what we call Ekpad Vibhuti, or 1 part, and Tripad Vibhuti, 3 parts. Altogether, there are 4 parts. Although they're unlimited, 3 parts are Vaikuntha, and 1 part is this material world. this material world is very small compared to Vaikuntha, Sri Vaikuntha. Sometimes we think of it the other way around. We think, oh, this unlimited universe, and then there's some place that we go to which is a special place, but it's not. But it is actually, they're both unlimited, but this is actually considered three times the size. So now, some people, they don't get this. They don't get this idea of how can you say something is unlimited, and another thing is unlimited, but this thing is more unlimited than that thing. But actually, in mathematics, you can make an analogy to that. There is a set of numbers. There's a set of numbers. So there's a set of numbers starting from 0, set of whole numbers, right? Starting from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 to infinity. That's an infinity. That's an infinite number of numbers. There's also a set of numbers, whole numbers, that not only start from 0 and go to infinity upwards, 1, 2, 3, 4, but they also can go negative, -1, -2, -3, -4. That is also infinite. If you add those together, if you have a set of whole numbers, whole positive numbers, and then if you have another set, which is a set of all numbers, both positive and negative whole numbers, that is also infinite. But that infinity of all whole numbers, which are positive and negative, is twice as infinite as the first one. Similarly, if we have the infinite numbers starting with 0, but also including all the numbers between, all the fractional numbers between 0 and 1, between 1 and 2, 1.1, 1.11, 1.111, like this, all of them, that's an infinite number of numbers, and that's infinitely more than those other two sets. So, in mathematics, we can conceive of different types of infinities. Here, we have Vaikuntha is infinite. The material world is infinite. But yet, Vaikuntha is considered to be 3 times as infinite as the other. So we call it Ekpad Vibhuti and Tripad Vibhuti. Vaikuntha is called Tripad Vibhuti. 3 times. The material world is called 1 time. Ekpad Vibhuti. In the splendor of 3/4, Vaikuntha, with the potential of perfect beatitude, meaning moksha, liberation, the Lord does not indulge himself, since the divine mind is focused upon those in bondage, right? Like a sleepless father remembering a son who is in another country. So we have this prodigal son story in the Bible, where there are many sons living with the father and following the father and the mother and living at home. But there's one son who gave up the company of the father and has gone off somewhere and is not obeying the father. And the father, although he has so many good sons around him, at night he's always dreaming and always thinking about how to save that one son who has gone bad, that black sheep of the family. So as if abandoning his home, the divine will, lingering at the side of those trapped in samsara, being unable to bear the separation from them, and in order to facilitate their return, grants them bodies along with their sense organs and empowers them to live according to the Shastras. Apprehending outright rejection, if he appeared directly to them, he stealthily enters into their hearts, right, as supersoul, and dwells within as their inner self. Like a mother fondly hugging her sleeping child unbeknown to it. He's always with us as Supersoul. Sharing their sorrows, protecting their being, not preventing their continued transgressions, giving permission, standing as if indifferent. He searches for an excuse to rescue them. If he fails to find even one minor defect that can If he fails to find even one minor defect that can be exaggerated into a virtue, right? We are full of defects. He's looking for the least defect that we have and he's trying to elevate that least defect, that smallest defect, into a virtue. He sheds tears just if he fails to find even something that he can call a virtue. He sheds tears just like a physician scratching the forehead of a patient to see if there is any bleeding or loss, or losing all hope, and losing all hope when no blood is seen. The doctor, trying to find out if the patient is still living, right? The Lord is in anxiety to try to save us, and he's looking down on us here in this material world and saying, he's very close to us as super soul, so he knows what we're doing, what we're thinking, and he's looking, he's saying, is this person actually dead to me? Is this person actually dead to me, or is there some spark of life that I might encourage or enthuse him to again realize that he is my eternal servant? He is such a robust optimist. The Lord is an optimist, and he will make any excuse to liberate the malefactors. Imagining, you mentioned the name of my sacred place. You spoke my name. You protected my devotee. You assuaged their thirst. You gave them shelter. Then he instills these qualities in them like a goldsmith testing gold on a touchstone. And with the aid of wax, collecting a gram of gold from what is rubbed off, he imagines distinctions of merit, however incidental or unintentional, over a series of births, and multiplies them tenfold. So the Lord is really looking for an excuse to see some good in the soul, in the errant soul, in the living being here in this material world. He's looking for an excuse to elevate that personality and to bring him back to himself. The central teaching of this passage is that unintentional good deeds, yadrichika sukrita, form the basis of the Lord's grace. He never loses heart at the transgressions of the jiva, but will always be vigilant for the slightest, even unintentional good deed that he could take as an excuse to liberate the jiva from samsara. Some examples of this are: a person wishing to journey to several places mentions the name of a city in which there happens to be one of the 108 sacred Divyadeshas or holy sacred Vishnu temples. The Lord would then reward that person as though he were actually speaking of the temple itself as an act of praise. So I might say, oh, I want to go and see the Taj Mahal, and the Taj Mahal is Agra, and I have to go from Delhi to Agra via Mathura. As soon as I say Mathura is the Lord's birthplace. It's a holy place. As soon as I say the word Mathura, that's a holy word representing one of the Divyadeshas of the Lord, right? And therefore the Lord credits me with that, even though I'm just a tourist who arrived in India who wants to go from Delhi to see the Taj Mahal. I'm not a devotee at all. I'm not a Vaisnava at all, but the tour guide explains to me we have to go to Agra via Mathura. And I say, oh, Mathura. We have to go via Mathura. As soon as I say or mention the word Mathura, I get credited with praising a Divyadesham, a holy place by the Lord. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, there's also the story of Ajamila. Ajamila was a dissolute man, had named his son Narayana, and on his deathbed he called out for his son, with the result that the Lord came to claim him, sent the Vishnu Dutas, his servants, to claim Ajamila, as if he had purposefully pronounced the sacred name. So in the Bhagavatam it says, Sankatyam parihasyam va, Stovam helanameva va, Vaikuntanama grahanam ashesha grahanam vidu. Right? This is a very important verse in the 6th canto of the Bhagavatam, where he gives the definition of what we call namabhas, or chanting the holy name of God, but not chanting it offensively, but not also chanting it purely, but chanting it to mean something else. So either while joking or singing, or there's some other reason that you're chanting. So here, Ajamila was chanting the name Narayana, but he was calling Narayana, he was calling for his son to come because he was dying. So he's calling his son, please come here. But the Lord took that as being chanting the Lord's holy name. So he purposefully sent the Vishnu Dutas to get that person, even though he was a sinful person, and the agents of Yamaraj, the agents of death, the Yamadutas, they also came there thinking that they would take that person to hell. So we can read the whole story in the Bhagavatam. It's a very famous story. A party of pilgrims is about to be attacked by robbers. A couple of policemen pass by unaware that this is about to transpire and scare the robbers off. Just by coincidence, some policemen come by and the robbers are scared off. The Lord would then reward them as if they had done it intentionally. A group of exhausted devotees pass by an irrigation canal and quench their thirst with the waters. The Lord would reward the landowner or the farmer who had intentionally dug the canal for the use of pilgrims instead of simply to irrigate his fields. So the farmer digs a ditch in which he diverts water from a river to his fields. Some pilgrims, some Vaisnavas are walking past, they're thirsty, they see the ditch, they can quench their thirst by drinking from the ditch. The farmer didn't make the ditch for them, but unintentionally, they quenched their thirst by drinking from the ditch, from the stream created by the farmer. He gets that benefit. The farmer gets that benefit. This is called in Gaudiya Vaishnavism Agyata Sukriti. Sukriti means, like here, Sukrita, the word Sukrita means good acts. Agyata, Jnata means knowingly. If somebody did this intentionally, knowingly, that is one thing. But agyata means unintentional effect, an unintentional act of piety. The same group of pilgrims then take shelter for the night on the veranda of a gambling den. The owner of the den, who is engaged in sinful activity of gambling and promoting gambling, would receive the benefit of providing shelter for the pilgrims. So this sort of thing. Okay, so here there's a footnote here. We're talking about the Ekpad Vibhuti and the Tripad Vibhuti we were talking about before. The entire manifest universe is said to comprise of 1/4 of the totality of possible being. The other 3/4 is the realm of Vaikuntha, which is what I explained before. Continuing on to Sutra 382, this message is reinforced by the story of Lalita and in other places. Queen Lalita of Vidarbha was the most favored amongst all the 300 wives of the king of Varanasi. So there was the king of Benares of Varanasi in North India, on the Ganges there. And he had 300 wives, of which the most favored was this Queen Lalita. But far from being conceited, spent most of her time tending the lamps in the various shrines attached to the palace. So a lot of times when we go see these palaces in India, the kings would also have their own puja rooms. They would also have their own separate temples and special private temples where they would worship the Lord. So she spent a lot of her time, even though she's the most favored queen, she would spend all her time making sure that the lamps were lit in these various temples, which were attached to the palace. She explained her favored position to her co-wives with reference to the events of a former birth, which she could remember well. So we normally can't remember our previous birth, but somehow or other she could remember it. So she told her co-wives she had been born as a rat that lived in a temple dedicated to Vishnu by Maitreya, the royal priest. One night during the month of Kartik, right, which is a month in October, November, right, she was attempting to steal and eat the wick of a ghee lamp. So she's a rat in a temple, and she attempted as a rat to eat a ghee wick, because the ghee wick is just cotton, but it's full of ghee, and ghee is a nice thing, a nice food stuff, and the rat wanted to eat the ghee and eat the wick of the ghee lamp when she heard the mewing of a cat So there was a cat nearby making a sound. She had a heart attack from terror, and while she lay dying, her head happened to raise the wick of the lamp and rekindle it. So she was biting this wick of this lamp, but then fell over and just reached up with the wick of the lamp, which touched the flame and was rekindled and was also burning. For this act of unintentional merit, she was reborn in the exalted position of this Queen of Varanasi. And this story is from Vishnu Dharmottara Purana. So this is an unintentional act in a previous life. So the ignorant take it for granted that the Lord simply blesses them. So those people who are ignorant, they take it for granted. They think that the Lord is simply giving his blessings. They don't see that there might have been some unintentional action by the living being. The wise, like Namalwar, mindful of the Lord's magnanimity, exclaim in gratitude, "This God placed himself inside my mind after considering me worthy enough. Why did he neglect me for so long before? I pray that the Lord of Tirupur, surrounded by hill-like buildings, should be enough to tell me the reason." So, the quotations here from Tiruvaimoli 10.6.8 by Namalwar. These are all from Tiruvaimoli by Namalwar. On the basis of what good deed does the Lord of Tiruvattar is in the very south of Tamil Nadu, near to the Kerala border, so one of the holy Divyadeshams, illumine my mind. So on the basis of what good deed does the Lord of Tiruvattar illumine my mind? So what good deed did I do? That Lord, whose form is comparable to deep water. Deep water is blue in color, very deep blue, dark blue. Beryllium means the cudgel or the eye ointment that ladies wear, the black mascara that ladies wear on their eyes. So deep water, dark blue, and beryllium is like blackish, and then an emerald mountain. So imagine a mountain made of emeralds. So these are the colors which the Lord's form is considered to be like. Who possesses the discus that returns to his hand after combat whenever need be. Sorry about that. That returns to his hand after combat whenever need be, and whose head is perfumed by the sacred basil or tulsi, forever present on his body, which gives forth fragrance. So that's very interesting. The discus, he throws the discus weapon and it returns to him like a boomerang, comes back to him again. That's very interesting. And then the next verse is Tiruvaimoli 175. So it's just giving him a nice. The first verse, of course, is describing the form of the Lord in Tiruvattar temple, and giving the color of his form, of his Divya Mangala Vigraha, his divine transcendental form. And it's just, the Alwar is just saying, Namalwar is just saying, what deed did I do? On the basis of what deed is the Lord illumining my mind, right? Coming into my mind, his form is coming into my mind, and I'm able to meditate upon him. In the next verse, he says, "How can I relish that Lord Krishna, who looks so sweet, after doing some mischief, looking into the eyes of the young milkmaids, the mischief maker, who happens to be my Lord, who happens to be my life, and who is a lamp illuminating all, he suddenly one day raised me up. and Tiruvai 232. O Lord, who possesses exalted and enigmatic qualities and has neither equal nor superior, O Lord, born like all things of this earth, O Lord, you assisted me by being a teacher, a father, a mother, who gave me birth, and by being the life of all, lowly that I am. I cannot recount all your favors. Tiruvai 573. O Lord, Vaikuntha is your kingdom, the discus is your weapon, and the eagle, Garuda, is the emblem of your banner. O Lord, the color of black clouds, dwelling in the city of Sirivaramangalam, where by your grace many are learned in the four Vedas reside. You accept me as one worthy, even though I am worthless before. You accept my servitude. I do not know how I should repay you. And coming from the previous quotations that were given from Tiruvai Moli in Sutra 349, you corrected my perverse mind. You conferred on me a mind that will always serve. So this is the grace of the Lord that he's conferring on the living beings. The ability to meditate upon him, the ability to serve him like that. And but in the beginning, the point to be remembered here is in the beginning, Namawa is saying, what is the base? What is the good deed that I've done? He doesn't know the good deed that he's done because it may have been unintentional. Sutra 385. Let us recall the discussion which took place on this subject one day in the time of the commentator Ramanujacharya, when all the learned teachers had met in the assembly on the eastern side of the great hall at Sri Rangam, awaiting the start of the procession. So on the eastern side of the great hall at Sri Rangam, the great hall in Sri Rangam is the 1,000-pillared mandap. It has 996 pillars. It's called the 1,000-pillared mandap. It's called the 1,000-pillared mandap, and it's where the Lord goes during the Vaikuntha Ekadasi festival for 11 days, including the Vaikuntha Ekadasi, and 10 days for 10 days after that, because it's actually a 21-day festival. The first 10 days are conducted inside the Arjuna Mandapa, which is inside the Sri Rangam temple sanctum area. And then after the opening of the Vaikuntha gate, the Vaikuntha Dwara or Paramapada Vasal, on the day of Vaikuntha Ekadasi, the Lord goes out on procession and goes to that Tirumamani Mandapam, or it's also called 1,000-pillared mandap. So apparently there was a discussion with Ramanuja and some Vaishnavas on the eastern side of the temple, where that Tirumamani Mandapam 1,000-pillared mandap is, which is very close to where my house is today. There's just outside, there's a white Gopuram there called the Velai Gopuram, just next to the 1,000-pillared mandap, which you can enter. That is the eastern gate of the Sri Rangam temple. The Lord is actually lying down facing south. He's lying down with his feet to the east and his head to the west, facing south, which is a part of the story of how Ranganatha came to Sri Rangam. But anyway, we won't go into that today. But he's looking down to the south towards Sri Lanka, where he was supposed to go according to the order of Lord Rama, and Vibhishana was taking him there. So anyhow, so on the eastern side, which is the side of where the feet are of Lord Ranganatha and where the 1,000-pillared mandap is, Ramanuja and some teachers were waiting there, awaiting the start of the procession. So sometimes we have a procession there, either probably if the procession is starting there, it's going back into the temple after the Lord has been out for listening to Divya Pranams in the 1,000-pillared mandap, which is what he does during the Vaikuntha Ekadasi festival. He's there listening to. So when he goes for Abhishekam there, or to be bathed or whatever, for some reason he goes to that 1,000-pillared mandap. But on the way back, but so just before the beginning of that procession, as they waited patiently, one of them remarked in an outburst of self-congratulation, "Having cooled our heels, waiting on all and sundry all these days, it is indeed our good fortune, Sukrita, that today we are awaiting at the door of our Lord, where we all rightly belong." This invoked a query by another. What is it that impels a person immersed in samsara towards God? Some attributed it to unintentional merit, yadrichika sukritam. Sri Kidambi Perumal mused, so this is one of the devotees there, mused whether they had to propitiate another god known as Sukrita Deva. So what he's saying is, somebody said, well, what is it that impels us, or how are we impelled towards God being here in samsara? What pushes us towards God in samsara? And Sri Kidambi Perumal said, well, maybe we had to worship some other devata to get the sukriti, the good reaction that we can achieve God, like that, sort of like the gopis in Vrindavan, the milkmaids in Vrindavan in Tirupavai, which is the month of Margali is coming up in less than a week, and so we remember Tirupavai, the 30 verses of Andal, where she thinks of herself as a cowherd girl, and she says we should all wake up in this month of Margali and worship the goddess Katyayani to get Krishna as our husband. So this was something that the cowherds did in the time of Krishna, is that they worshipped the goddess Katyayani, they worshipped the form of Durga to try and get Krishna as their husband. So here, this Vaishnava is saying, maybe we worship some other devata, some other god, some other minor god, in order to get the sukriti, or the good favor that would impel us to worship Sriman Narayana. It was further clarified by Pillai Tirunayanur, Arya. Aryas are the persons who chant the Divya Prabandham in front of the Lord, right? That the term Sukrita itself refers to the Lord only. And by this means, he accelerates the progress of his subjects, and that was all. So this was an idea that people sort of understood. People had the idea that there was some sukrita, there was some good action that we did. So we did some unintentional good action, right? So is it really unintentional? No, not really, because that action is actually the Lord. The Lord is working through us to create that action. So it's not really unintentional. The Lord is allowing us to do something which we consider to be unintentional, but it's not really unintentional. It's intentional by the Lord. The Lord wants us to be able to do something which will, in turn, bring us towards Him, bring us to Him in this material world. So He arranges for that unintentional sukriti. He Himself is that sukriti. He Himself is that unintentional good action. The Lord Himself. So 386. Therefore, it is seen that good works done unintentionally are taken as a qualification. Right? So some people may think, okay, good works done unintentionally are a qualification. So we need some qualification to come towards God. I think this was discussed before. Now, following this, it may be suggested that agyata sukrita, adventurous merit, assumes the form of cooperative grace instead of spontaneous grace. Right? So now, see, we're getting this idea that this agyata sukriti, these good unintentional or unknowing good deeds, right, would be some sort of effort that the individual, even if unknowingly, it's an unknowing effort that the individual does. But as said previously in that discussion in the last sutra, no, that's actually the Lord's intention. So 387. Even these unintentional deeds, this is the Siddhanta, this is the perfection, this is the perfection of this argument here. Even these unintentional deeds are initiated by the Lord through the bestowal of a body and sense organs upon the jiva. So even that we can't say, because he's working through us. He's giving us this body, these sense organs, and he's impelling us to do these unintentional good deeds. So if the Lord had originally not permitted the jiva to enter into a physical body, it would not have been capable of performing any unintentional good deeds. Therefore, the mere fact of allowing embodiment and facilitating the conditioned circumstances which lead to the act are a sign of grace. Are a sign of grace. Think about that. What does that mean? Our embodiment by the Lord is not a punishment. It's actually a sign of grace, because it leads to our being, to moksha, to our coming to moksha. Therefore, the mere fact of allowing embodiment and facilitating the conditioned circumstances which led to the act, this so-called unintentional act, are a sign of grace. So everything is because of spontaneous grace. Everything is because of causeless mercy. Everything. Even this unintentional sukriti. So, when we come to the end of that section, the futility of self-effort. Do we want to continue on today, or do we want to leave this for next time? Continue. Section 53, the futility of self-effort. Sutra 388. Upon pondering this, okay, so now we were talking about, in the previous section, we were talking about unintentional good acts, what is known by some people as agyata sukriti, or it could also be called sukritam, right? Sukritam, krita means to do something, sukritam means to do something good. Agyata means to know, agyata means unknowingly. So unintentional good acts, right? And it was shown previously that it's really not unintentional, but it's actually out of the spontaneous grace or the causeless grace of the Lord that these things are offered to the jiva, right? As a way of helping the jiva to come back to the Lord. From pondering this, one concludes that it is not necessary to do anything, right? Considering all these factors, one should give up the reliance on any form of self-effort to achieve freedom from karma, as well as anxiety about liberation from samsara. So this is a very straightforward sutra here. From pondering this, what we just discussed before, one concludes that it is not necessary to do anything. Right? What does Lord Krishna say in Bhagavad Gita? Sarva dharmam parityaja. Abandon all varieties of religion. Abandon all varieties of self-effort. All actions. And indeed, even the Advaitins, who are not Vaishnavas, right? They also say that sannyas, or giving up of renunciation, is the way. Renunciation of action is the way, right? Actually, we don't, as Vaishnavas, we don't renounce the action, but we renounce the fruit of the action. So, even this comes from the Upanishads too. Nakarmana na prajaya danena tyage naike tyaga means renunciation. So this is sannyasa suktam. Nyasa is this called nyasa, one of the 32 Upanishadic vidyas that we read about in the Upanishads. The nyasa vidya means nyasa means just to place oneself, to place something. So what it means is to place yourself at the feet of the Lord, or to surrender. So it means property. Nyasa means property. It's another word for property. So let's continue on. 389. In the ancient in the ancient farm of samsara, or the analogy here is of samsara like a farm. The Lord is the cultivator or farmer, has been raising crops of bhakti from time immemorial, regularly plowing, sowing, and reaping. Some grains, having fallen during the harvesting process, now spontaneously grow to maturity, yielding fruits without any assistance from the farmer. So it is that with these unintentional good deeds. Okay, so this is the analogy. So you imagine if you have a farmer who grows some plants, some crops, some grains, and then he harvests the grains. When he harvests the grains, some of them fall in the field, and during the time when he's got the harvest in before he plants the new crops, they begin to grow themselves spontaneously. You may ask, what are these fruits that are yielded? 391. Having experienced repeatedly the results of good and bad deeds done in former births, and becoming weary of karma and its results, understanding that life just continues on the basis of habitual pattern formations created by subliminal activators or samskaras, there comes a stage when some serious introspection begins. Who am I? What was my original position? Where am I going? These are the fruits referred to earlier. So in the beginning of the Vedanta Sutra, the first sutra is, of course, Atato Brahma Jigyasa. Now is the time to inquire about all these things, these spiritual questions. Who am I? What's my original position? Where am I going? So that's how the Vedanta Sutra starts out, the inquiry into Brahman, the inquiry into the spiritual nature of existence, the inquiry into that. That comes at a certain point, after many births and deaths, when one gets weary of the karma and its results, understanding that life just continues and is basically a habitual pattern of formations. We have all these different samskaras. Samskaras don't necessarily just mean the ritual samskaras, but they mean impressions that happen to us as we go through life, things that change us and things that we carry with us to the next part of our life, or to the next life even. Such philosophical introspection and inquiry are the result of seeds sown by the Lord, and are the first indications of that the jiva is turning back towards Godhead, back towards the Supreme. 392. The manner of this is explained in the sacred scripture, beginning with, as thieves, quote, as thieves in the case of a traveler, unquote. So this is from the Arhibudnya Samhita. Arhibudnya Samhita is one of the Pancharatra Agamas, and it deals a lot with the incarnation of Narasimha. So Pancharatra Agamas are books that teach us about the worship of the Lord, especially in his iconic or Archavigraha form, deity form in temples. So in the Arhibudnya Samhita 1434, it says, as thieves in the case of a traveler who has gone away, leaving his belongings, will cease at all efforts at stealing when he comes back. Thieves in the case of a traveler who has gone, leaving his belongings, will cease at all efforts at stealing when he comes back. It's only natural. If you have some belongings and you leave them for some time, the thieves may come and plunder them. But when they see you coming back, they're not going to steal anymore. A traveler, the Lord, leaves his baggage, the jiva, unattended. Thieves, in this case, punya and papa, or merit and demerit, right? good works and sins, are about to steal it, to steal away the jiva. When the traveler is seen returning, the thieves run away at the very sight of the traveler. This is the meaning of this analogy. (393) Is not this clearly stated in the words, quote, gives grace without any expectation? So in Tiruvai Moli 878, Namalwar says, I do not know any other favor. The Lord who controls me thoroughly gives grace without any expectation to those whom he gives it. He, retaining the three worlds in his stomach in a manner not affecting their routine, has taken a place in my mind, even though I am infinitesimally small. So the point being here is he's talking about spontaneous grace. He's talking about causeless grace of the Lord. And therefore he's saying, the Lord who controls me thoroughly gives grace without any expectation to those whom he gives it. He has no expectation of anything towards the jiva, but yet he gives his grace to the jiva. If it be asked, Sutra 394, if it be asked, are good deeds not indicated to be the cause of grace by the words, quote, to those who do? The answer is that superficially there is a contradiction with the words, quote, without expectation. The hypothetical querist takes sevarkatku to mean to those who do good deeds, rather than to those whom he gives it. So it depends on how you interpret this word in Sutra 394. There's a quotation, and the quotation starts with Sevakatku, and that word can be interpreted in different ways, right? But the correct way is to understand it as to those whom he gives it, and not to those who do the good deeds. 395. If it be said that attraction to the Lord arises from grace and not from good deeds, but the lack of animosity towards the Lord arises from good deeds, it is answered that this specific result cannot arise from those general good deeds. Before one begins to be attracted to the Lord, one should be free from any animosity towards him. Some say that the lack of animosity springs from the aforementioned agyata sukrita, or unknown or unintentional good deeds, and that the attraction to the Lord, abhimukyam, comes from grace. The rejoinder to this, the argument against this, is that the absence of animosity is a prime factor in the development of self-realization, and it can hardly be attributed to such a paltry thing as agyata sukrita, or unintentional good deeds. Merit, or sukrita, refers to those deeds which the scriptures enjoin in their injunctive sections and which one strives to perform. Sutra 396. If it be said, how can we call those actions meritorious which are not enjoined by the scriptures and are unknown to us? The answer is we don't, but the Lord does. The Lord has been striving from time immemorial to liberate us from the bondage of samsara, and he is ever searching for any excuse to liberate us. Thus, the adventitious good deeds are accepted by him as meritorious, so that he can then facilitate our spiritual advancement. Yeah, so he's taking any excuse to take anything that we do as good. He's thinking up ways to make those the actions that we do as merits, and helping us to make spiritual advancement. Sutra 397. As to this, there seem to be some contradictory statements in the hymns of the Alwars, but we abstain from discussing these for fear of becoming too prolix. Okay, I'm going to have to look up that word. Prolix is an adjective, actually. It means using or containing too many words or tediously lengthy. So what he's saying here is that there are in the words of the Alwars, in the Nalaya Divya Prabandham, the 4,000 hymns of the Alwars, there are some contradictory statements seemingly. But we're not going to discuss all of those here because that would take too much space, too much time. So we've just mentioned some of them, and maybe we'll mention one or two of them, but there may be some other text where probably some other texts like Bhagavad Vishayam, which go into this in more detail. So that's why we should probably study Bhagavad Vishayam, the commentaries on the Alwars prayers, to know more about the Alwars prayers and any seemingly contradictory statements in them. Sutra 398. Therefore, if one merely thinks of the Lord who strove for one's upliftment, even when one is in a state of indifference, one can be free of anxiety. That's pretty straightforward. And Sutra 399. In none but Madhusudana, this is a quotation from Tiruvaimoli 276, in none but Madhusudana do I take refuge. On and on I sing, as an end in itself, hymns of his glory. This is because of Trivikraman's extraordinary grace, who took births alongside me to set me aright through the ages. So this is explaining about Nama was saying here, all I can do is I can just praise the Lord because of his extraordinary grace. He takes birth in this material world along with us, where he takes his avatar. He comes down and descends and teaches, or he sends great acharyas to help me, like that. This is his grace. His grace is that he descends. He comes in the deity form in the temple. Comes in the different avatars at different times. In fact, he comes and creates this whole material world just for me, and to set me right. And he sends so many people to try and help me to right myself. So, does anybody have any questions or comments about all the different sections that we went through today? I think we'll leave it here. We'll pick it up next time at Sutra 400, which is starting the 54th section, the Lord's enthusiastic attempts to reclaim the jivas. That's only very short, but then we'll go on and we'll continue on. We're almost to the end of Sri Vacana Bhushana, so we're getting into some very interesting points here.
Thank you, Swamiji. Thank you.
Namaskaram. Okay.
Namaskaram. Namaskaram.
Namaskar.